The Zelthari Empire had conquered 17 star systems before they ever heard of Earth. Their warships moved through the galaxy like shadows, silent and deadly. No species had ever stood against them for more than 3 rotations of their home world. The Zelthari believed themselves to be the ultimate predators, the chosen masters of the universe. Their scales shimmered with pride whenever they spoke of their victories. Commander Vexel stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Silence, watching the blue planet grow larger on his viewing screen. Earth, such a small world, he thought. The intelligence reports had told him everything he needed to know about these humans. They were soft creatures made of flesh and water. They fought among themselves constantly. They had barely learned to leave their own planet. This would be the easiest conquest in Zelthari history. His second officer, a younger warrior named Thrill Rower, approached with updated battle calculations. The numbers were almost laughable. Human weapons were primitive. Their ships were slow. Their defenses were weak. The Zelthari fleet of 200 vessels would crush them within hours. "Commander, shall we broadcast the surrender demand?" Thurl asked, his voice dripping with boredom. Vexel waved a clawed hand dismissively. "Why waste words on creatures who will soon be dust? Begin the attack. Show them what happens when inferior beings dare to exist in our path." The Zelthari fleet descended upon Earth like a storm of metal and fire. Their plasma cannons lit up the darkness of space. Human satellites exploded into fragments. Communication networks went silent. Within the first hour, the aliens destroyed every military installation visible from orbit. Cities burned. Millions of humans died before they even understood what was happening. Vexel watched the destruction with cold satisfaction. The humans scattered like insects beneath his heel. Their primitive missiles bounced harmlessly off Zelthari shields. Their aircraft fell from the sky like burning leaves. Everything was proceeding exactly as expected. By the end of the first day, the Zelthari had established complete orbital superiority. They landed their ground forces in 12 major cities across the planet. The soldiers marched through the streets with their energy rifles ready, expecting to find cowering survivors begging for mercy. Instead, they found something unexpected. The cities were empty, not abandoned in panic, but systematically evacuated. Where there should have been chaos, there was eerie silence. Buildings stood intact but lifeless. The streets that should have been choked with fleeing civilians were clean and quiet. The Zelthari soldiers searched house after house, finding only cold meals and personal belongings left behind. Thiro reported this strange finding to Commander Vexel. "They have fled into the wilderness, Commander. Primitive survival instinct. We shall hunt them down in time." Vexel nodded, but something cold touched his mind. A feeling he had never experienced before. It took him several moments to recognize it as the faint whisper of doubt, deep beneath the mountains of what humans called the Rocky Range. General Marcus Stone stood before a wall of screens, showing the devastation above. His face was hard as the stone his name promised. Around him, the combined military leadership of Earth's remaining nations worked in grim silence. They had prepared for this possibility for decades. Ever since the first alien signals were detected 30 years ago, humanity had been secretly building, not weapons to fight in space. They knew they could not match alien technology in that arena. Instead, they had built something else entirely. They had built a network of underground cities capable of housing billions. They had built factories hidden beneath the ocean floors. They had built a new kind of army, one designed not for quick victory, but for endless, grinding resistance. General Stone turned to his staff. "Phase 1 is complete. The evacuations were 93% successful. Now we begin Phase 2. Let them think they have one. Let them spread across our world, and then we show them what humanity truly is." The officers nodded. Each of them understood the plan. Each of them had trained for this moment their entire lives. Above ground, the Zelthari continued their occupation. They established command centers in the burned ruins of human cities. They sent patrols into the forests and mountains, searching for survivors to capture and study. They found some, of course, isolated groups who had not received evacuation orders, stubborn individuals who refused to leave their homes. The aliens treated these humans as curiosities, specimens to be examined and discarded. Commander Vexel grew impatient. A conquered world should provide slaves and resources. This world provided only empty streets and silent buildings. His soldiers reported strange findings each day. Underground tunnel systems that seemed to lead nowhere. Factory equipment that had been dismantled and removed. Libraries with no books. Museums with no artifacts. It was as if the humans had stripped their own civilization bare before fleeing. "Where have they gone?" Vexel demanded during a command meeting. A population of 8 billion does not simply vanish. His intelligence officers had no answers. Their scanning technology could not penetrate the deep rock of Earth's crust. The planet's magnetic field interfered with their sensors. The oceans were too vast to search efficiently. For the first time in his long career, Vexel faced an enemy he could not find. Weeks passed. The Zelthari established mining operations and began extracting resources from the surface. They grew comfortable. Their patrols became routine rather than vigilant. Their soldiers complained about the boring assignment. There was no glory in occupying empty cities. no honor in fighting an enemy that had apparently surrendered without resistance. Then the attacks began. It started small. A supply convoy disappeared in a mountain pass. All 60 soldiers and their vehicles simply gone. No distress signals, no survivors, no evidence of what had happened. Vexel dismissed it as an accident, perhaps a rock slide or equipment failure. 3 days later, an entire patrol base went silent. When reinforcements arrived, they found the structures intact but empty. Every Zelthari soldier had vanished. The only evidence of what had occurred was a single word scratched into the metal floor in the alien script. The translation made no sense to them. Remember. Vexel stared at the report for a long time. His claws dug into the armrest of his command chair. Somewhere in the back of his ancient predator brain, that whisper of doubt grew louder. The humans had not surrendered. They had not fled. They were waiting, and they were watching, in the darkness beneath Earth's surface. General Stone received confirmation that the first strike teams had completed their missions. The aliens had taken the bait. They believed themselves to be the hunters. They had no idea that they were the prey. Begin Phase 3, Stone ordered. Show them what happens when you invade the wrong planet. The war had only just begun. Commander Vexel ordered a full military response to the disappearances. He deployed 10,000 soldiers across the northern continent, establishing checkpoints and patrol routes that covered every road, every path, every gap in the mountains. His officers assured him that no human could move through such a dense web of surveillance. The aliens had thermal sensors, motion detectors, and orbital satellites watching every shadow. For 2 days, nothing happened. The patrols reported clear skies and quiet forests. Vexel began to relax. Perhaps the earlier incidents had been isolated acts of desperation by scattered survivors. Perhaps the humans were finally accepting their defeat. On the third night, the darkness came alive. It started at a checkpoint near what humans called Denver. 20 Zelthari soldiers stood guard at an intersection, their weapons ready but their attention wandering. The night was cold and empty. Nothing had happened for hours. Private Kethis was the first to notice something wrong. The sound of insects had stopped. The wind had died. The world had become perfectly, unnaturally silent. Before he could raise the alarm, the lights went out. Every power source in the checkpoint died simultaneously. Emergency backups failed. Even the glow from Zelthari armor went dark. Then came the humans. They emerged from the ground itself, rising through hidden tunnels covered by false rocks and artificial grass. They wore no powered armor, carried no glowing weapons. Their equipment was simple. Knives made of ceramic that did not register on metal detectors. Crossbows firing bolts tipped with toxins engineered specifically for Zelthari biology. Strangling wires thin as spider silk but strong as steel cable. The battle lasted less than 4 minutes. Not a single shot was fired from an energy weapon. Not a single scream escaped into the night. When the sun rose, the checkpoint was empty except for 20 Zelthari corpses arranged in a perfect circle, their eyes staring at the sky. Similar attacks happened across the planet that same night. 37 checkpoints fell silent. Over 800 soldiers died. And still, no human was captured. No human was even clearly seen. They struck from shadows and vanished into shadows, leaving only death behind. Vexel received the reports in a state of growing horror. His tactical officers could not explain what was happening. Their technology should have detected the humans. Their armor should have protected his soldiers. Their superior training should have won every engagement. Yet somehow, these primitive creatures were killing his warriors with weapons that belonged in a museum. They are adapting, Thurl said quietly, studying the attack patterns. They learned that our sensors detect energy signatures, so they use weapons with no energy. They learned that our armor deflects high-velocity projectiles, so they use slow poison. They learned that we rely on orbital surveillance, so they move underground and strike only in darkness. Impossible, Vexel growled. They are animals. They cannot adapt so quickly. With respect, Commander, the evidence suggests otherwise. Vexel struck his second officer across the face, sending Thurl sprawling to the deck. But even as his rage subsided, he knew the younger warrior spoke truth, that humans were learning, and they were learning faster than any species the Zelthari had ever encountered. Deep in the underground, city designated Bunker 7, a woman named Captain Alina Vasquez cleaned the blood from her ceramic blade. Around her, 43 other soldiers did the same. They were members of the resistance force, trained since childhood for exactly this type of warfare. No fancy technology, no dependence on systems that could be jammed or hacked. Just human strength, human cleverness, and human determination. Good work tonight, Alina told her team. But this was just the warm-up. Now they know we are here. Now they will start hunting us seriously, which means Phase 4 begins. Phase 4 was psychological warfare on a scale no alien could imagine. Over the following weeks, the Zelthari soldiers began to break. It was not the physical attacks that destroyed them, though those continued with devastating regularity. It was what came between the attacks. Messages appeared scratched into walls where no human could possibly have reached. Words written in Zelthari script, inside secured bases, inside locked rooms. We see you. You will not sleep. Remember you're dead. Soldiers began reporting strange sounds at night, footsteps that moved through walls, whispers in the darkness that spoke their names, shadows that moved when nothing was there to cast them. The Zelthari were a proud species, but they were not prepared for terror. They had always been the monsters that other races feared. They had no experience being hunted, being watched, being made to feel small and helpless. Their discipline began to crack. Soldiers refused night patrol duties. Officers became paranoid, suspecting betrayal from their own ranks. Some warriors simply disappeared, not killed by humans but driven mad and fleeing into the wilderness to escape the constant, crushing dread. Commander Vexel tried to restore order. He executed deserters publicly. He doubled the guard rotations. He demanded reports every hour from every unit under his command, but nothing he did could stop the creeping fear that was eating his army from the inside. One night, he woke to find a human standing at the foot of his bed. The figure was a woman, dressed in dark clothing that seemed to absorb the light. Her eyes were steady and cold. In her hand she held a knife, the blade gleaming faintly in the dim emergency lighting. Vexel reached for his weapon, but the woman was faster. She pressed the knife against his throat, just hard enough to draw a thin line of purple blood. "Do not move," she said. Her Zelthari was perfect, without accent. "I am not here to kill you." "Not yet." Vexel, frozen, his heart pounded in his chest. "How did you get in here?" "The guards are alive. They will not remember seeing me. We have drugs that do interesting things to your species' memory centers." The woman leaned closer and Vexel saw something in her eyes that chilled him to his core. It was not hatred. It was not rage. It was calm, patient calculation, the look of a predator studying its prey. "I came to deliver a message," she continued, "from all of humanity. We want you to understand something important. We want you to understand what you have awakened." She pressed a device against his chest, and Vexel's vision filled with images. He saw human history, not the sanitized version from their public broadcasts, but the real story. Centuries of war, mountains of corpses, weapons of unimaginable destruction. He saw what humans had done to each other throughout their existence. The concentration camps, the atom bombs, the chemical weapons, the endless, brutal creativity of human violence. "You thought we were weak because we fight among ourselves," the woman whispered. "You thought our wars were signs of primitive savagery. You were wrong. Our wars taught us. Every generation, we learned new ways to kill. We perfected the art of making monsters pay for their crimes. We survived plague and famine and catastrophe. We crawled through hell itself and emerged stronger." The images faded. Vexel lay trembling, unable to move. "You have two choices," the woman said, stepping back toward the shadows. "Leave our world, return to your empire and tell them that Earth is not worth the cost. Or stay, and discover why every species in this galaxy should fear the darkness where humans hide." She was gone before he could respond, vanishing through a wall panel that should not have existed. Vexel did not sleep again that night. He sat in the darkness watching the shadows move, and for the first time in his long life, he understood what it meant to be prey. The next morning, he ordered his fleet to bombardment positions. If he could not conquer these humans, he would burn their entire planet to ash. But the humans had anticipated this move. They had been waiting for it, and they had prepared something terrible. The eternal silence moved into position above Earth's equator, its plasma cannons charging with enough power to turn continents into glass. Around it, 173 other Zelthari warships formed a sphere of death. Their weapons pointed at the blue planet below. Commander Vexel had made his decision. If he could not have Earth, no one would. "Target the largest population centers," he ordered, his voice hard with anger. "The underground facilities they are using as shelters. Burn through the rock if you must. I want nothing left alive." His weapons officer hesitated. "Commander, our sensors cannot penetrate deep enough to locate their primary bunkers. We could bombard the surface for years without reaching them. Then we bombard for years, begin firing." The first plasma bolts fell toward Earth like falling stars. They struck the dead cities the Zelthari had already conquered, turning ruins into craters. The ground shook. Firestorms spread across empty landscapes. From orbit, it looked like the planet itself was dying, but the humans did not burn. General Stone watched the bombardment from Bunker Prime, located 3 kilometers beneath a mountain range in what had once been Switzerland. The facility stretched for miles in every direction, housing 12 million people and the manufacturing capacity of a pre-war nation. Similar bunkers existed on every continent, connected by tunnel systems that allowed movement across the entire planet without ever reaching the surface. "Casualties?" Stone asked, though he already knew the answer. "Minimal, General. Their weapons cannot reach us. They would need to crack the planet open to touch our primary installations." Stone nodded. Everything was proceeding according to plan. The aliens had made the predictable choice. The choice that every brutal conqueror made when faced with resistance they could not crush. They had chosen destruction over retreat. But in doing so, they had given humanity exactly what it needed. Time. For 40 years, humanity had prepared for this moment. Scientists, engineers, and soldiers had worked in secret to develop weapons that could challenge alien technology, not by matching it, but by exploiting its weaknesses. The Zelthari relied on shields that deflected energy in high-speed projectiles. They relied on sensors that detected electromagnetic signatures. They relied on predictable patterns of warfare developed over millennia of easy conquests. Humanity had built weapons, designed specifically to bypass every one of those advantages. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, in a facility known only as Site Omega, a team of engineers made final preparations on the first of these weapons. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the control console, her heart pounding despite years of training. She was about to change the course of the war. Project Phantom is ready for deployment, she announced over the secure channel to General Stone. 24 units prepared for launch. Execute. Stone replied simply. The units rose from the ocean floor, climbing through miles of water toward the surface. They were small, each one no larger than a human fighter jet. Their hulls were coated in materials that absorbed every form of radiation the Zelthari could detect. Their engines produced no heat signature, no electromagnetic pulse, no sound. They were invisible in every way that mattered. The Phantoms reached space and began their silent approach to the alien fleet. Aboard the Eternal Silence, the sensor officers detected nothing unusual. Their screens showed the same empty void they had shown for hours. The bombardment continued. Commander Vexel watched the planet burn and felt his anger slowly give way to satisfaction. That humans would learn the cost of defiance. Their species would be remembered only as a cautionary tale. He never saw the first Phantom attach itself to his ship's hull. The weapon was simple in concept but revolutionary in execution. It was not a bomb or a missile or an energy cannon. It was a disruption device, designed to interface with Zelthari technology and turn it against itself. Within minutes, 24 Phantoms had attached to 24 different warships. They began their work simultaneously, sending carefully crafted signals into the alien computer systems. The signals were not viruses or hacking programs. They were something far more insidious. They were commands written in the Zelthari's own military code, intercepted and decoded by human intelligence agents over months of patient observation. The first sign of trouble came when the Eternal Silence's weapons systems locked up. Commander Vexel shouted orders, but his officers could not respond. Their consoles had frozen. Emergency alerts blared as life support systems began to malfunction. "What is happening?" Vexel demanded. Before anyone could answer, the ship's artificial gravity reversed. Officers flew toward the ceiling, crashing into metal surfaces with bone-breaking force. Lights flickered and died. In the chaos, Vexel tumbled through the air, striking a bulkhead hard enough to crack his skull casing. Similar scenes played out across the fleet. Ships lost power. Engines fired in random directions. Weapon systems targeted each other instead of the planet below. In the span of 10 minutes, the mighty Zelthari armada dissolved into chaos. General Stone watched the destruction from his command center. Tactical displays showed enemy vessels colliding, exploding, drifting dead in space. It was beautiful in its terrible efficiency. Phase 5 is complete, he announced. Begin Phase 6. Phase 6 was the counterattack. From hidden launch sites around the globe, missiles rose into the sky. Not the primitive rockets the Zelthari had easily defeated during their invasion, but something new. These missiles were guided by artificial intelligence systems copied from captured alien technology. Their warheads contained materials synthesized from alien weapon components. They could not be jammed, could not be shot down, could not be stopped. The missiles reached orbit in minutes and began their deadly work. Commander Vexel regained consciousness just in time to see the end of his fleet. Through the cracked viewport of his ruined bridge, he watched ship after ship disappear in blossoms of white fire. The Eternal Silence shuddered as missiles struck her hull, breaching compartments, killing crew members by the hundreds. "Retreat," Vexel gasped, crawling toward the emergency beacon. All ships, retreat. But most of his ships could no longer respond. Their communication systems were destroyed or their crews were dead. Only 37 vessels managed to break free of Earth's gravity well and engage their faster-than-light drives. They fled into the darkness of space, leaving behind the burning wreckage of their invasion force. In Bunker Prime, cheers erupted as the last alien signatures vanished from the tactical display. Soldiers embraced. Officers wept with relief and joy. They had done the impossible. They had driven away an enemy that should have crushed them without effort. But General Stone did not celebrate. He stood before the screens, his face grim, already thinking about what came next. "This is not over," he said quietly, his words cutting through the celebration. 37 ships escaped. They will return to their empire and tell their leaders what happened here. They will come back with larger fleets, more powerful weapons, and a burning desire for revenge. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what he meant. "We have won a battle," Stone continued, "but the war has only just begun. Those aliens thought they could take our world. Now we must make them understand that their worlds are not safe from us. We must bring the fight to them. We must become the monsters they feared we would become." He turned to face his officers, his eyes hard with determination. "Prepare the fleet. We are going to war." Far above, in the wreckage-strewn space around Earth, The last burning hulls of Zelthari warships tumbled through the void. They would become debris, falling eventually into the planet's atmosphere to burn up like falling stars. A reminder of what happened when invaders underestimated humanity. And in the underground cities, in the bunkers and factories and military bases hidden beneath the earth, humanity began to prepare for the next phase of the conflict. Not defense this time, but attack. Not survival, but vengeance. The Zelthari had awakened something ancient and terrible, something that had slept within humanity for millennia, waiting for the right moment to emerge. Now that thing was awake, and it was hungry. 3 years passed since the Zelthari fleet fled Earth. 3 years of preparation, construction, and transformation. The planet that had hidden beneath its surface now rose again, but it was not the same world the aliens had invaded. It was something new, something forged in the fires of war. The first human warships launched from orbital construction. Yards built using captured alien technology. They were not elegant vessels like the Zelthari designed. They were brutal, functional machines bristling with weapons and armored with materials that could withstand direct plasma fire. Human engineers had studied every piece of alien equipment they could salvage, learning its strengths and weaknesses, improving upon designs that alien species had considered perfect for millennia. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Relentless, the flagship of humanity's new expeditionary fleet. She had survived the underground war, leading countless raids against alien positions. Now she led the first offensive action in human history beyond their home solar system. "Fleet status?" she asked, her voice calm despite the magnitude of the moment. "All 12 vessels report ready, Captain. Jump drives charged. Crews at battle stations." Alina nodded. 12 ships, a tiny force compared to the hundreds the Zelthari commanded. But these 12 ships carried humanity's anger, humanity's grief, humanity's unbreakable will to survive and conquer. "Engage jump drives. Take us to the Vardaxis system." Space twisted around the fleet as they crossed distances that light itself would need years to travel. When reality stabilized, they found themselves in a star system the Zelthari used as a mining outpost. 3 alien vessels patrolled the area, protecting extraction facilities on a barren moon. The Zelthari detected the human ships immediately. Their commanders assumed it was some kind of navigational error, perhaps a lost convoy of refugees. Nothing in their experience suggested that humans could build faster than light vessels, let alone venture into Zelthari territory. That assumption cost them their lives. Elena did not waste time with warnings or demands. All batteries, open fire. Human weapons screamed across the void. Railguns launched projectiles at velocities that punched through alien shields like paper. Targeted electromagnetic pulses disrupted enemy systems. Missile swarms overwhelmed point defense networks designed to counter single powerful attacks rather than hundreds of smaller ones. The battle lasted less than 3 minutes. All 3 Zelthari patrol ships were reduced to expanding clouds of debris. The mining facilities on the moon below sent frantic distress signals, but there was no one left to answer them. Landing parties away, Alina ordered, "Secure the facilities. Salvage everything useful. Destroy the rest." Human soldiers descended to the moon's surface. Their powered armor systems copied from captured Zelthari designs but modified for human physiology. They moved through the mining complex with ruthless efficiency, capturing terrified alien workers and eliminating any resistance. Within hours, the entire outpost belonged to humanity. Word of the attack spread through the Zelthari Empire like wildfire. A species they had dismissed as primitive prey had struck deep into their territory. It was not merely a military defeat. It was an insult to their very identity as the galaxy's supreme redditors. Emperor Zelthonus, ruler of the Zelthari Empire, convened his war council in the great chamber of the imperial palace. The assembled commanders represented the most experienced military minds in their civilization, warriors who had conquered dozens of species and never known defeat. "The humans must be destroyed," Zelthonus declared, his ancient voice heavy with fury. "Not merely defeated, destroyed. Their world turned to ash. Their species erased from existence. No trace of them can remain." The commanders agreed readily. They authorized the deployment of the Grand Fleet, 500 warships carrying the full might of the Zelthari military. It was a force designed to conquer star systems, not deal with a single upstart species. But after the humiliations they had suffered, nothing less would satisfy their wounded pride. While the Zelthari assembled their armada, humanity continued its campaign of terror. Human strike teams appeared throughout Zelthari space, attacking supply convoys, destroying communication relays, raiding military depots. They never engaged in direct battles they could not win. Instead, they struck from shadows and vanished before retaliation could arrive. The psychological effect was devastating. Zelthari civilians began to panic. Soldiers grew paranoid and jumpy, firing at shadows that might contain human assassins. The Empire's military had to divert resources to protect assets across dozens of star systems, spreading their forces thin trying to guard against an enemy that could appear anywhere without warning. General Stone coordinated these strikes from a mobile command vessel that never stayed in one location for more than a few days. He watched the reports come in from across the galaxy and felt something like satisfaction. The humans were doing exactly what they did best. They were fighting a war of attrition, using creativity and determination to overcome superior numbers and technology. The Grand Fleet has assembled, his intelligence officer reported. 500 vessels. They depart for Earth in 2 standard days. Stone nodded. They had known this moment would come. The Zelthari would never accept anything less than total victory after the humiliations they had suffered. They would throw everything they had at Earth in a desperate attempt to restore their pride. Humanity was counting on exactly that reaction. Activate Protocol Omega, Stone ordered. It is time to end this war. Protocol Omega was the culmination of everything humanity had learned about the Zelth, their technology, their psychology, their military tactics. It was a trap decades in the making, designed to exploit every weakness in the alien empire. The first element was the battlefield itself. Human scouts had spent months mapping the space around the Zelthari home system, identifying navigation hazards and positioning hidden weapons platforms. When the Grand Fleet gathered to launch their attack on Earth, they were assembling in a killing ground without realizing it. The second element was intelligence. Human agents had infiltrated Zelthari communication networks, learning their encryption codes and command structures. When the Grand Fleet received orders to attack Earth, those orders were subtly modified to route the fleet through a specific corridor of space, a corridor filled with traps. The third element was the weapon that would change everything, humanity's greatest secret. Developed in the deepest bunkers of Earth, a device that could generate a field of absolute electromagnetic disruption across a sphere of space, hundreds of kilometers in diameter. Within that sphere, no electronic system could function, no engine could fire, no weapon could charge. Ships would become dead metal boxes, helpless and drifting. The device was called the Silence, and it was about to be used for the first time. Captain Vasquez positioned her fleet at the edge of the trap zone, hidden behind a dense asteroid field. Her ships were modified to function using purely mechanical backup systems, allowing them to operate even within the Silence's disruption field. It had taken years to develop these modifications, years of painstaking work to create vessels that could fight when all other technology failed. The Grand Fleet has entered the trap zone, her sensor officer announced. 500 ships. Exactly as predicted. Elena felt her heart begin to pound. This was the moment everything depended on. If the plan failed, humanity would be destroyed. If it succeeded, they would change the galaxy forever. Activate the Silence. Deep in the trap zone, hidden among asteroids and debris, a single device came to life. It was small, no larger than a cargo container, but it contained power beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. When it activated, space itself seemed to shudder. The Grand Fleet died in an instant, not destroyed, but killed in a way that was almost worse. Every ship lost power simultaneously. Engines went dark, weapons went cold, life support systems failed. 500 vessels, full of the Zelthari's finest warriors, became 500. Coffins drifting through the void. Elena watched her tactical display fill with dead signatures. Then she gave the order that would haunt Zelthari nightmares for generations. All ships advance. Show no mercy. The human fleet swept through the helpless armada like wolves among sheep. They fired their mechanical weapons into defenseless ships, breaching hulls and venting crews into the vacuum. They destroyed vessel after vessel with cold, methodical precision. The greatest military force the Zelthari had ever assembled was slaughtered without being able to fire a single shot in return. When it was over, the trap zone was filled with wreckage and frozen corpses. 500 ships destroyed, millions of Zelthari dead. The Grand Fleet that was supposed to erase humanity from existence had been erased itself, and now nothing stood between the human fleet and the Zelthari homeworld. The final battle was about to begin. The Zelthari homeworld of Zetaxis Prime was the center of an empire that spanned 17 star systems. Its orbital space was protected by massive defense platforms, each one capable of destroying a fleet by itself. Its atmosphere was watched by thousands of sensor satellites. Its surface held the imperial palace, the great temples of their ancestors, and the genetic archives containing the legacy of their entire species. Now, 12 human warships hung in space beyond the planet's defense perimeter, and the mighty Zelthari Empire trembled in fear. Emperor Zelthona stared at the tactical display in his war chamber, unable to comprehend what he was seeing. The Grand Fleet was gone. Every ship, every warrior, every hope of military victory had been wiped out in a matter of hours. His advisors whispered in terrified voices about surrender, about negotiation, about finding some way to appease the monsters that humanity had revealed themselves to be. Captain Elena Vasquez broadcast her message across every communication frequency the Zelthari used. Her face appeared on screens throughout the Empire, in military installations and civilian homes alike. The predator species saw a human woman, small and seemingly fragile, speaking with calm authority that made their scales crawl. People of the Zelthari Empire, your invasion fleet came to our world with dreams of conquest and slavery. We destroyed it. Your Grand Fleet came with dreams of revenge and genocide. We destroyed it as well. Now we stand at the gates of your home world, and you must choose what happens next. She paused, letting her words sink in across millions of minds. You can fight. Your defense platforms are powerful. Your remaining military forces still number in the millions. You may even destroy some of our ships before we destroy you. But make no mistake, if you choose war, we will not stop until your empire is ash in memory. We will burn every world you colonized, shatter every station you built, erase every trace that your species ever existed. In the Imperial Palace, advisors urged immediate attack. Pride demanded resistance. Their ancestors would never forgive surrender to creatures they had once considered prey. But Emperor Zalthonis watched the human woman on the screen and saw something that his advisors refused to acknowledge. He saw truth. These humans meant every word they said. They would destroy everything. They would sacrifice their own lives without hesitation to ensure the Zelthari paid the ultimate price. It was written in the cold certainty of the human captain's eyes. In the steady calm of her voice, the Zelthari had conquered species across the galaxy. Because those species valued survival above everything else, they could be threatened into submission, broken by demonstrations of overwhelming force, made to accept slavery rather than face extinction. Humans were different. Humans had stared at extinction during the invasion and chosen to fight anyway. They had hidden underground for months, suffering and dying in darkness, never once considering surrender. They had built weapons from nothing, created armies from refugees, and transformed their entire civilization into a machine of war. They were not creatures who could be threatened or broken. There was something the Zelthari had never encountered before. They were a species that would rather die than kneel. Elena continued her broadcast. There is another option. We do not desire your destruction. We did not start this war. You came to our world seeking conquest, and we defended ourselves. If you surrender now, if you accept peace, your species will survive. Your culture will continue. Your worlds will remain yours. But there will be conditions. Your military will be limited. Your expansion will be controlled. And every generation of your people will be taught what happened when you attacked humanity. They will learn that we are not prey. They will learn that the universe does not belong to the strong alone, but to those willing to fight for what they love. She leaned forward, her gaze burning through the screen. You have 1 hour to decide. Surrender or extinction. There is no third option. The hour that followed was the longest in Zelthari history. Throughout the Empire, citizens watched their leaders debate, argue, and weep. The proud warriors who had built an empire through conquest faced a choice that shattered their understanding of their place in the universe. In the end, Emperor Zalthonis made the decision himself. He silenced his advisors, dismissed his commanders, and walked alone to the communication console in his private chambers. We surrender, he said, his voice heavy with grief and shame. We accept your terms. The war is over. The transmission was received aboard the Relentless with quiet acknowledgement rather than celebration. Elena understood what this moment meant. Humanity had proven itself to the galaxy. They had taken on an empire that should have crushed them and emerged victorious through sheer determination and refusal to submit. But victory came with responsibilities. General Stone arrived in the Zethaxis system 2 weeks later aboard a massive vessel designated the Treaty, built specifically for this purpose. He met with Emperor Zalthonis in the Imperial Palace, surrounded by officers from both species who eyed each other with suspicion and grudging respect. Your people do not understand what you have done, Zalthonis said during their first private conversation. You have overturned the order of the galaxy. Species will learn that the powerful can be challenged, that empires can fall. There will be chaos. Stone nodded slowly. Perhaps there will be something better. Your empire was built on fear and domination. Ours was built on cooperation and shared sacrifice. We do not want to rule the galaxy. We want to live in it, alongside species who respect our right to exist. A naive dream, the Emperor replied. Maybe, but it is the dream we fight for, and we have proven that we are willing to fight very hard indeed. The peace treaty was signed on the anniversary of the original invasion. The Zelthari Empire was reduced but not destroyed. Their military was limited to defensive forces. Their conquered species were given freedom to choose their own destinies, and humanity took its place among the stars as a recognized power. Neither the greatest nor the smallest, but something more important. They were respected, and they were feared. In the years that followed, other species approached humanity with offers of alliance and trade. Some were refugees from Zelthari oppression, grateful for their liberation. Others were neutral powers who had watched the war from afar and recognized that these humans were valuable friends and terrible enemies. Captain Elena Vasquez became Admiral Vasquez, commanding humanity's growing fleet as it expanded beyond their home system. She established outposts, protected trade routes, and trained the next generation of warriors, who would carry humanity's banner into the unknown reaches of space. General Stone retired to Earth, living quietly in a small house above one of the bunkers where he had commanded the resistance. He spent his final years writing the history of the war, ensuring that future generations would understand what their ancestors had endured and achieved. Emperor Zalthonis ruled his diminished empire for another century, guiding his people through the painful process of accepting their new place in the galaxy. In his private moments, he would sometimes watch recordings of his encounters with humans, trying to understand what made them so different from every other species his kind had faced. He never found a satisfactory answer. Perhaps there was no single explanation. Perhaps humans were simply a species that refused to accept limitations, that would fight against impossible odds because fighting was what they did, what they had always done throughout their blood-soaked history. On the anniversary of the war's end, humans throughout the galaxy observed a moment of silence for those who had died in the struggle for survival. They remembered the billions lost in the initial invasion, the soldiers who gave their lives in the underground resistance, the crews of the ships that never returned from battle, and they looked to the stars with eyes that held no fear. The universe had tried to destroy them. It had sent monsters to burn their world and enslave their people. Humanity had responded with fire of their own, with courage that defied logic, with a will to survive that nothing could break. They had proven that they belonged among the stars. They had earned their place through blood and sacrifice and unimaginable determination. And if any other species ever forgot that lesson, humanity would be ready to teach it again. In the darkness between stars, human ships patrolled the borders of known space, watching for threats and protecting the civilization their ancestors had fought so hard to preserve. They carried the legacy of every soldier who had ever fought for humanity's survival, every scientist who had created weapons from desperation, every leader who had refused to surrender when all hope seemed lost. They were the children of a species that looked into the void and refused to blink. They were humanity, and they were never going to stop.